Okay, it's 5:30. I'll call this meeting to order. I'd like to start by acknowledging that this meeting is respectfully held on the traditional territory of the Sycos First Nation, on whose land we live, work, and play. You have an agenda circulated. We have one late item, 6.6, which is support for the C2C forum with Sycos First Nation. And we'll add that in there if somebody can move that we adopt as amended.
So moved. Second.
All in favor? Carried. We have the minutes from the March 11th meeting. Would someone like to move adoption? Okay. Anything coming out of the minutes? Nope. All in favor? Carried. We don't have any bylaws, so we'll move straight to delegations. And 22nd. Thank you. March 22nd. Would somebody like to move adoption? Seconder?
Second.
All in favor? Carried. Delegations 5.1. Rio Tinto. I'll hand it over to you, Andrew.
All right, just while I'm getting my screen shared, there we go. And I'll just bring you all back so I can see. There we are. Excellent. Can you all see my screen?
Yep. We can.
Excellent. Look, thank you very much, as always, for the opportunity to provide a bit of an update. It's quite timely as we sort of look at the winter past and look at the freshet forward. So from an operations perspective, it's always timely, but regardless, well worthwhile to continue to check in. And as always, really appreciate that opportunity. Okay, I'll just shift my screen. I just wanted to share a few things for the agenda. So we'll go through a bit of an update on the Oolakan here in the Kamano River and just touch on that, a drought and hydrology update, a look at the water engagement initiative, some of the monitoring work that will be ongoing and has been ongoing this year, into spillway maintenance, and then lastly finish off on social investment. So we should be able to move through fairly quickly. I just wanted to share with this group and share sort of more broadly that the Oolakan fishery this year has been one of the highest on record. So 45 tonnes were harvested this year, and in the end stopped fishing because they had enough, not that there was a need to curtail the fish, to curtail in the interest of fisheries retention. So again, it is an endangered species, culturally significant fish for the Haisla First Nation, but for coastal First Nations across this area. Was well traded throughout the region, and I believe there's been Haisla boxes found as far away as Idaho, and then even up into Alaska as well. So quite a significant cultural link to the Oolakan fish. Since the year 2000, BC Works has been running the Oolakan protocol to ensure that we do not disturb the natural habitat and do not disturb the spawning of the Oolakan when that happens. So effectively, the Oolakan eggs after spawning are exceptionally vulnerable to water level changes, either high level or low level. So they can be dewatered, which causes an issue, and they can be effectively, I don't want to say drowned, but notionally they can suffer if they get too far down. So we run the powerhouse at an absolute flat level throughout that period and maintain everything we can so as not to disturb that river level during that period of time. We've been working with the Haisla Fisheries and the Haisla First Nation for now nearly 33 years, collecting data on each Oolakan run. And we have the largest set of data that is has been consistently recorded year on year for any river in the world and anything on the Pacific North Coast. So consistently those data sets are used, they're taken and they're shared by universities, fisheries biologists, studies, etc., and providing that relationship. So again, just thought it worth sharing sort of more broadly some of the work we're doing with nations on the fisheries and those endangered species that are prevalent. Okay, shifting gears a little bit closer to the Nechako and to the Vanderhoof region. Current snowpack, we got our helicopters in the air on the 1st of April and managed to take a manual snowpack survey. It's been quite an unusual snowpack this year. We've seen ice layers, crust layers, etc., which make it exceptionally difficult to manage from an automatic snow pillow perspective. We see bridging and we see sort of wet spots and saturations. So we have to do these calibrations. The calibrations are absolutely critical. And this year and this month, you can see that effectively the measured snowpacks were significantly less than the automatic pillows. So, right around that 60% mark as you make your way from west to east. So 60%, 61%, 57% long-term average, and even some of these lower lying ones significantly below those levels as well. So 46, 54, and 27% long-term average, recognizing that there is a big difference in, long-term average at Skins Lake versus long-term average at, say, Tatsa, etc. So it is highly variable, but regardless, significantly below long-term average. And, I drove through to Prince George all the way through to Sun Peaks 2 weeks ago, and I was just astounded at how little snow there is in those low-lying watersheds at the moment. So looking at the aggregated snowpack across the Nechako Reservoir, we've continued to be quite lean, basically since the first weeks of February. We've had a couple of small bumps, but then even a regression across March. Right now, we are sitting right on sort of that low level. And if we go much longer like this, we will be bordering on one of the lowest snowpacks across that period in time. And you can see that 2016 was that rapid regression of the snowpack from that hot, dry spring that we saw. We're currently sitting at 60% of long-term average, representing only 251 millimeters of snow water equivalent in the snowpack, compared to long-term average sitting, right now, right around that 400 millimeters sort of range. And then in some of those higher years, significantly above that again, up at the 600 millimeter range. So you can see we're right down in the bottom. And given we've gone through a drought leading up to this, you can see that in the next slide, that the effect of low reservoir level coupled with low snowpack is quite a dire picture for us looking forward. You can see Tatsa Lake is now at an all-time low. You are seeing some of these numbers come together, and then 12s, 14s in the percentile rank as we continue to assess these. Reservoir elevation over the last 20 days continuing to trend down in line with what we would reasonably expect for this time of year. It trends down as we're not seeing that replenishment from either snowmelt or precipitation. Generation continues, and we are pulling all the way down and expect to typically continue down to the 1st of May. Although we are at that period now when we can see bumps up, and you can see it on some of the other years' hydrographs, there are certainly bumps up by the 1st of April. But it could also be, as long as the 1st of June before we start to get some of those bumps up. So we are on the precipice of the freshet, but we still haven't seen, as we sit here today on the 8th, we still haven't seen signs that the freshet has begun yet. Okay. So looking at flows for the last 30 days, look, it is quite a low picture. We are starting to see some bump up in the Notley. Interestingly, around the, over the last, the last month. So in the last week or so, we've started to see some increase in the Notley, but, certainly we're still only talking 7 cubic meters per second, up from, 5 cubic meters per second. So relatively small. In my time, I haven't seen, the 7 and the 4 at Notley and Stalaco. And ultimately, the contribution in Vanderhoof is Skins Lake spillway release plus Notley. we're not seeing any other contribution from those low-lying creeks, rivers, and the low-lying creek tributaries. So looking backwards at the last month is the chart on the left. Total precipitation in the last month was 40 millimeters only across the reservoir area. Historical average is 68. And like I said, typically we see significantly more than that. Looking forward for the next 10 days, this was from Wednesday last week, so into this period. Again, we're seeing very low levels of precipitation. Blue is anything less than 10 millimeters. And then that sort of lighter green is, 14 to 20 millimeters that we're forecasting in just a small portion of the watershed area that you see here. We're starting to accumulate precipitation on the coast, but again, nothing that's really making it over the coast mountains and into that reservoir area. When I've looked at the provincial map, every couple of days I'm looking at this map. It's been a little frustrating, if I'm honest, to see the Peace region, getting precipitation, to see the southern inland areas receiving precipitation. And here we are right in the heart of the province, continuing in this drought situation and the drought scenario. Again, just weather, nothing out of the ordinary here. We are starting to see daytime temperatures continuing to creep up above zero. I know even sort of 2 weeks ago, similarly, some temperatures that were quite unseasonably warm as we move into April, fairly consistent with what we can typically expect. Okay, so this is an interesting chart that I like to show. This one tells a lot what's going on. So this is the inflow versus the outflow. So first thing we'll look at the outflow. The yellow is Skins Lake spillway discharge remaining completely consistent across the winter. Once the freshet starts, we will see a bump up to 49 cubic meters per second. It'll be a relatively small bump on this chart as per the annual water allocation at the minimum. Just looking at the red curve here, the red plots the total discharge. So it's Skins Lake spillway plus Kamano. And so that water that's heading out there is the generation. The flat line across the latter part of February and March is us only generating for smelter load. We have no energy exports at the moment and virtually no energy exports across 2024, even into 2025, given the magnitude of this drought. The little two bumps that you see here are what we call equichange returns, and that's that return of energy to BC Hydro that they have effectively stored in our reservoir last summer on their behalf. It is a function of the energy purchase agreement where BC Hydro can opt to store energy in the interest of the BC Hydro ratepayer in the Nechako Reservoir. And then when they need that energy, typically in winter, they can call upon it for us to deliver it back to them. So again, just want to acknowledge that they're not traditional energy exports. That's returning BC Hydro's energy. And then even looking back further, you can see that that water was lower than it is today. And that was the period in time where we were importing energy. So quite a stark picture, certainly quite a big challenge for us into this winter. It will go all the way across 2024 and into 2025. The real risk for us as we sit here today is looking at the volume of water before this time next year. We're currently 4 feet below long-term average. Even with an average summer, spring and summer, we expect to be 5 feet below long-term average this time next year. So the risk profile of the Nechako Reservoir is increasing significantly with this ongoing drought. Freshet volume, this is basically a forecast that we look at. It takes the snowpack, it considers ambient weather conditions, it considers the conditions that we went into freeze up in, it considers the forecasts it considers the historical range of springs into summer that we've had. So the wettest springs would be represented, the wettest springs and summers would be represented over here on the right, and recognises that there'd be an inflow freshet volume above long-term average, all the way through to the driest scenarios that we could conceivably have from where we sit today. The average is right on 72% of long-term average. And looking at this chart, we can see that we have a 20% chance of setting a new historical low for freshet volume in this spring. I am quite concerned that this freshet will exhaust early and that we will basically see a lack of contribution from the natural tributaries well before sort of the peak of summer, at a period in time where the rivers will be under duress. Looking at the River Forecast Centre and their charts, we're seeing and predicting similar concerns for the Bulkley and the Chaco, Stewart River, and a number of the other, even the Camano River, natural contribution significantly below long-term average. So this is the chart that keeps me up at night at the moment. This is where we predict and plot the reservoir elevation across into next winter. And as we sit here today, the biggest challenge that I need to manage is an empty reservoir before we make it through to the next spring freshet in 2025. So you can see that that level of where we are today, translated to where we could be next year, is significantly below that. And then as you look at the range of low cycles, so if the drought continues across the summer and into next winter, we can reasonably expect to be bumping off of an empty reservoir next year. So this situation is quite dire for us, and we are working on all mitigations that we can. I've spoken about the curtailment of all energy exports already. We're also looking at opportunities to import energy, and we're even now looking at what the impacts of curtailing the smelter may be from all of the aspects: financial, social, employment, contracting, etc., etc. So quite a stark period there. The Notley River flows, I won't dwell on this one. Basically, you can see the red is right alongside of the 2023 number, and the 2023 number was a historic low across the winter as well. So no relief at all, and this drought is now tracking towards its 12-month trend. Inflows to Vanderhoof, we can reasonably expect to see that natural increase during the freshet, as well as the increase in releases from Skins Lake Spillway from 32 to 49. This comes from the River Forecast Centre website, and you can see that sort of first freshet bump trending down until we get to summer temperature and the STMP period, where water is released from Skins Lake Spillway in order to cool the Nechaco River at Vanderhoof. So that is a product of the temperature and the flow, so that we can reasonably expect that volume of water to be more than average. Certainly, in an extreme year, it will provide a little bit of relief for the Nechaco, where other unregulated rivers could be seeing significantly more or significantly less water. Class 1 Skins Lake Spillway discharge, as I said, we will be bumping up to 49 cubic meters per second in the next couple of weeks, and then holding flat across STMP. There are no scenarios now where we can expect to be releasing before STMP. The magnitude of the deficit in the reservoir is such that we will be looking to hold minimum flows across that period. Lastly, the Vanderhoof forecast, they're virtually a mirror of the one from the River Forecast Centre, seeing a slight bump up into that freshet and then down and through again. All right, I'm going to pause there before I shift gears, because I think it's worth just sticking on the hydrology and the drought situation before we shift into some of the others. So any question or comments there?
Councillor Frankel, did you have one?
Yeah, I do.
Andrew, thanks for the uplifting presentation tonight. And I'm just, I do appreciate these reports. I really do. I think we all do. I'm thinking way ahead here. What is the peak of Tahats and Narrows elevation? Where is that at?
So basically, anytime the reservoir elevation gets below 2789, we see the hydraulic restriction effect at Tats and Narrows, and we are seeing it now. So we are at we are just above 2788. So right now, Tatsa Lake is actually pulling down faster than the rest of the reservoir, and you can see there's a level deficit. It's not dry, so don't take me wrong. Tatsa Narrows is not dry, but it is a hydraulic restriction on the flow on how much water can pass. And right now, we're moving 106 cubic meters per second through the powerhouse, and less than that is flowing through Tatsa Narrows. So the Tatsa Lake water level comes down accordingly.
And what is the elevation of the Tahats and Narrows? The peak underwater. Yeah.
I'd need to confirm. I would have to confirm. I can take an action to respond to the group. In my mind, it's 2785, but we just had it resurveyed last year. So I don't want to quote that on record now that I have a new piece of data available to me.
Oh, that's what the mayor and I were thinking the same number. So.
It's probably because I said
that's
it.
Good. Okay. Thanks.
Any other questions? As Councillor Franco mentioned, this was, it is very stark. We knew it was very stark, but it is good to get these updates. So we're informed on what's going on and what the state of the river is going to be.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, and we will continue our commitment to work with the mayor, council, community leaders forums. I'm open if there is an interest in having a community session. I'm more than interested in trying to bring together the River Forecast Centre, us, and facilitating something as well. I think, for me, it's a situation as critical as high water. This low water situation is going to be tough for a whole lot of reasons this year, and no relief in sight. So I'm eternally the optimist, and I'm looking forward to a wet spring, but at the moment the data's not showing me that.
I think that would be a really good idea to do that and get that information out publicly.
Yeah, so we'll work with Armin to start shaping that together, and perhaps bring together some of those community leader participants at that as well. We can also have River Forecast Centres speak through their drought levels and the other implications to what that means.
That would be great.
Okay, so shifting gears to the Water Engagement Initiative. Look, phase 1 is now complete. We reached consensus through an alternative flow. Unfortunately, with the drought the way it is, we're not going to see an opportunity to implement that this year. But if we do see something change dramatically, we certainly will be targeting those new targets. The phase 1 report is currently being assembled. I am putting the pressure on the consultants and the groups to finalise that and get that draft report in front of participants. Phase 2 shaping is underway. Armin's done a lot of work to poll the participants and gain their feedback. That's provided us some interesting outputs that I look forward to sharing with the group at our next meeting. And then we will basically look to agree the path forward for phase 2/phase 3, and I say that deliberately. And in the meantime, we'll continue working on health of the river, the reservoir, and then also starting to engage local, provincial and federal government. I think the output of phase 1 gives us something quite tangible to take back to those government regulators. Okay. Monitoring work with Avison. We've been doing a lot of work with Avison, continuing to be a fantastic contract partner for us, and just want to call that out as part of the heart and soul of Vanderhoof. continuing to work on new monitoring, snow monitoring devices, improving our instrumentation, the weather station monitoring and maintenance, the manual snow surveys. They're the ones that have been up in the helicopters doing those surveys for us. The flow measurements, pressure transducers installed downstream of the spillway. This was something I'm incredibly happy to have in place. We now have an accurate instrument downstream of the spillway to verify actual releases, and it actually provides us the ability to reconcile flow at Skins Lake Spillway to the Cheslada gauge, to the Fort Fraser gauge, Nodley gauges all the way through, and we can actually really accurately monitor that water balance now. And for me, as we look at these alternative scenarios and a future, the best quality data is the better way for me. We've had them on the river doing water quality sampling in the Nechako, and as well looking at a scarification trial on the Nechako River as well, with some of the other advocates for river health in the region. Okay. Spillway management maintenance. Very, very proud to say Cheslada Contracting Limited, the CCLP, is continuing to knock it out of the park on our operations and maintenance contracts at Skins Lake Spillway, doing a fantastic job. For those who know Quinton Beach, he's got a saying, he's making the spillway great again. So doing a whole lot of work to really get that maintenance up to where it should be. Our dam safety certificate, 7-year dam safety certificate work was done last year. We're waiting for the final report to be issued, or draft report to be issued in the coming weeks. We'll then revise the dam emergency plan, and in the fall this year, it will be the subject of a roadshow to engage all of the other communities downstream on those new dam emergency plan, the inundation maps, and to ensure all of the first responders, et cetera, have awareness of the situation and their accountabilities in responding to a dam emergency were it to ever happen. There's been a lot of work as well to revitalise the spillway campsite. It's been a fantastic opportunity for us to, again, just repair, rebuild those facilities. In addition, we've put new floating docks in response to feedback we've heard. Increased the boat ramp now has concrete access, not just dirt into it. So again, just increasing the usability of the Skins Lake Spillway campsite. So certainly recommend it to anybody who's looking for a good fishing getaway to head out there over the summer. Okay, lastly, social investment in 2023. So looking back at the year, $3.1 million spent across the operational footprint, with 1.2 million coming into the watershed region. So I've been, very proud to build that profile in the watershed region and continuing to increase those opportunities. So the partnerships with Vanderhoof, including the themes of environment, education, climate change, food security, as well as the events. And I won't go through each of these, but you can see the breakdown there going to those. And in addition, the NEEF commitments going to the continued funding of the Surge and Recovery Initiative, the hatchery, as well as, UNBC work with river research, etc. So again, I think we can always push to do more, and I'm always looking at how we can maximize valuable contributions, but again, worth looking back down the hill and seeing what's been part of the year. Okay. That's it from me. I'm certainly open to any questions or queries. And again, just appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks. That was a great presentation. Anybody have any questions for Andrew? Not seeing any. So yeah, just yet again, let's set that public meeting up. And
Yep.
just want to say, I do think the community leader sessions are very valuable, and look forward to those keeping going, so we keep that information flowing on a pretty constant basis.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And look, I will be in the Vanderhoof area on, I think, the 1st and 2nd of May. So certainly I'll be looking to reach out and set up meetings with any who are interested. Might be a good time to target that public workshop as well.
That sounds really
Excellent.
good.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay, moving on, 5.2, camping at the baseball fields. Brenda Ferguson, come on up.
Hi.
Hi.
As you all know, I'm Brenda Ferguson. I run actually 2 of the baseball tournaments in Vanderhoof. The main one that I have taken over from Eric Lytle, who ran it for just about 20 years, is the Ballapalooza tournament, which is the first weekend in June of every year. So this year it will be May 31st, June 1st and 2nd. One of our big catches, so to speak, is camping. We've had multiple of the out-of-town teams, and this year is shaping up to be way more out-of-town teams than in-town teams. I actually only have, I think, 4 in-town teams registered, and the rest are out-of-town teams coming from players from Prince Rupert, a lot from Prince George. But the big push for them is we used to be able to camp at the ball fields, and for us, it's more of a community thing. Everybody kind of has their trailers, and with the amount of kids that come in, everybody kind of watches everybody's kids, you know, and it's with the trailers. I understand that the campsite is wonderful down by the river. For us, it's difficult to kind of go back and forth and make sure everybody's safe and the kids are good. So our big portion, and I know that it's not a welcomed thing, but there are people that have a few beverages at the ball fields, and for us to keep them all in one spot and avoid the possibility of something happening, which is not what we want at all. So we definitely encourage them not to do so, but I can't control anybody else. So that has been one of our big things. And I know that some of the out-of-town teams have even stated that if they want us to charge them a fee to camp at the ball fields, they're willing to do that. They just would like to be able to stay neutral to the ball fields instead of traveling back and forth. And that's the main portion is, and as well with, I know the swimming club as well has wondered if they could camp at the ball fields as well, because they're right there, and their meet this year is June 23rd weekend. But they're also early mornings, so they're back and forth to their camp trailers and whatnot. And like I said, that's one of our big pushes is in the evenings, we all like to venture to each other's campsites and play some bocce ball games or some beanbag toss or what have you. But it's all to keep us together and try not to separate us all. And that's just our main thing. I mean, if it's a possibility, we would even look into bringing porta potties down so that that's not an issue as well, because that's the last thing we want is that out and about as well. And we would take full responsibility of making sure everything is cleaned up. Nothing is left behind.
Any questions for Brenda? Councillor Martins.
Thanks, Brenda. I'm just curious about, like you said, you take full responsibility. Is that included? Like, is there a liability policy that you guys would have, or?
There is insurance through the actual association has insurance. What level that is, I don't have that information because I'm not with the association anymore.
Yeah, one little clarification on that, just as far as naming, DOV as additional name insured, or, those kind of things. Today's world, that's a pretty big.
Oh, yes.
Pretty big thing.
I can definitely look into that with the association and find out if there is, it may already be in there.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's not. I'm just saying
Yeah.
It just needs to be some clarification there for me, for sure.
And I know that there is other tournaments planned for this year. I know there's one planned for the beginning of May as an icebreaker tournament. Bubba Lyle is putting that one on. I have the one in June, and then I put on another one in the fall called Fallapalooza. But I'm trying to move that up a little bit earlier because It's getting too late in the season and it's pretty darn cold down there in September. So, but I do believe the actual league is looking into putting on another tournament during the summer as well. So it just is more, there's a lot of people that come into the community, and that's to keep them in the community. I would rather than the out of town teams travel back to Fraser Lake, Fort St. James, Prince George. That's.
Anybody else have any questions? Okay, well, we'll have staff look at that some more. My memory, if it serves me correct, I think it was the state that the grounds were left in is why we canceled camping many years ago.
Okay.
So good to hear that you would be taking responsibility for cleanup.
Oh
I
yeah,
think
and
that would
each
be-
and every year we have been.
Okay.
We've been make sure there's nothing left, garbages. We try and lock all, because sometimes we can't get to the dump Sunday night once the tournament's all complete.
Yeah.
So we try and lock it into the shed so that the birds and the bears and everything else doesn't get to it before we can get it gone. So I usually go down the next morning and make sure everything's piled up and gone.
Great, awesome. Well, we'll have staff work on that and it'll come back to us and we'll be in touch with you.
Awesome. Thank you
very
guys very
much.
much.
Okay, 5.3, Veryware presentation. Sergeant Bates and Officer Schultz.
Oh, yeah, I don't know. Did you end up getting a presentation?
We have
Yeah.
it, it's that.
Stick. Oh, okay. You guys can see it, but nobody else can?
It might not be very helpful for us either.
Not even helpful for us either.
Oh, there we go. Perfect.
There we
Thank
go.
you. Lifesaver.
So we don't have any better news than you just heard about the water, so.
Yeah.
All right.
Unfortunately, it's kind of similar situation with bears. Water doesn't make things better, or not a lack of water anyway. Yeah, we thought we'd just provide like a basic overview of bears just to make sure everybody's on the same page, but it's pretty standard around in the north. I've worked in Mackenzie in the past. Sergeant Bates here has worked in on the island in the past, and it doesn't really matter where you go. There's issues with bears as soon as there's humans in the same area.
Yeah.
So we just wanted to go over some of the basics of what we've been seeing, but with the common attractants that we're seeing as a result of bears getting into food along the edges of town typically and wildlife corridors. So you see on the quick background slide there, I think that's slide 3 for you. Just in search of food, bears do wander into communities. They're attracted by certain household items. Usually it's smelly food, garbages, berries, and fruit trees. So in Vanderhoof, usually that's the river and the railway track. That's the most common corridor we're seeing them come in on.
Yeah, so I mean, you'll see bears, rivers are what we call natural wildlife corridors. And now when we leave green spaces around creeks and call them wildlife corridors. Bears like those. And they really like railroad tracks because in the spring they green up first. So that's how you can get bears that'll just pop up in the middle of town. Here it's a small town, but I've even seen it in large towns like the city of Nanaimo. We had one that just in the middle of town. Nobody'd seen it. It's noon and there's a bear in the middle of town. Where did it come from? So that is an issue. It's not unique to Vanderhoof, but it is one you need to consider.
Yeah. So this year was, or this last summer was exceptionally hard for us. You're looking at basically the COs that cover an area that consists of about 32,000 square kilometers. So our resources are spread thin. Therefore, proactive education sometimes is the best way we can spend our time. That's why we're here. But we do cover Germanston Landing, Fraser Lake, Fort St. James, Fort Fraser, Clucas Lake, Vanderhoof, obviously, and all the surrounding reserves in those areas. So that's about 7 or 8 reserves. So it is a large area.
And the wilderness, just for fun.
Yeah. And of course that. But for perspective, a lot of people don't necessarily see a lot of what we do day to day because we aren't necessarily in the public eye all the time. But we did receive a lot of calls this last year. And for perspective, there's a chart there on BlackBerry reports. I'm not sure which slide that would be for you guys, but we had last year total in our zone. So that area of 32,000 square kilometers, we had about 170 calls for black bears specifically. That jumped up to 955 this last summer. So you can see what the lack of water has done to bring bears in.
And that was due to the drought, which meant there was no berries. So given the report you got first, you can expect the same this year. And while our numbers were extremely high, Jonathan and I still probably spent 40% of our time in August and September in Prince George because theirs was worse.
Yeah.
I think so. A busy, so BC is divided into 8 regions. If a region gets 3,000 calls in a year, that's a busy region. So that would be Vancouver, Vancouver Island, the Okanagan. The Dominica, which would include us, Burns Lake, Prince George, Mackenzie, got over 3,000 calls in August. So we were a tad busy.
Yeah.
So we're trying to find ways through you people to reduce those.
Exactly, which leads us into living with black bears and some of our recommendations and what we are hoping you guys might be receptive to some of these ideas that we've promoted in other places like Whistler, Tumbler Ridge. But right off the bat, black bears across Canada and the US, they're actually very intelligent, very strong. They can get into almost anything that they really want to unless you proactively lock them out. So it is not by chance that bears just happen to not get into something. They usually will if you don't make an effort to keep them out.
We have video of them opening car doors, not by accident. Like they literally went to Carl's lock. They walked to the next one, there, and then they go.
Yeah. They learn.
There was one we dealt with in Vancouver Island. He got into a car that someone left food in once, and he continued to enter every car he came across, whether there was food or not in it. Every car he could access, he could. And FYI, they have this bad habit of going in and closing the door behind them. It's not good for your car when that happens.
Yeah.
It will look fine on the outside. It will be a write-off. There was one where it bent the steering column 2 inches. That's when the airbag went off and the party really started.
Yeah, we did have one of those in Prince George this year, actually. It's
And
very
for
similar.
those numbers, just, so over the last probably 50, 60 years, the black bear population's been growing up to nearly double. You're starting to see black bears show up in places where they haven't been in decades. Mostly in the southern states. BC's been pretty stable, but as those populations rise, those juvenile bears, when mom kicks them out, they got to go somewhere, and the vacancies are around town. So when we had that drought, the berries still grew well around the water, the lakes and the rivers, where people live. Then they found garbage.
And further to that, usually what we see in town on a normal year is the 2- and 3-year-old bears. So the young ones that are getting kicked out, they find their own territory, happens to be town because there's no other big bears there. Last year was like none other. We had a good 30 to 40% of the bears we were dealing with were north of 400 pounds, which is a mature, large, dominant bear. So you know that they're expanding territories and coming into towns on those because they're not finding food. So something that we definitely saw change with just last year alone. But you can see with the habitat map there, BC falls well within their normal range when we're not getting around that anytime soon.
I feel like population of black bears in BC is, I believe, 150 to 160,000. And it's been fairly stable for the last while. They don't do a lot of counting on it. They're just doing estimates, but.
And I think if I'm not mistaken, that's one of the highest in North America.
Oh yeah, it's about, well, we have 150, 160,000. They figure there's roughly 1 million in all of North America. So we got a pretty good chunk of it.
Yeah. Foraging with bears. Since food is scarce in the winter months, bears may forage up to 20 hours rather, in the months preceding the winter, because they need to get their body weight up. So they usually increase their body weight by 35% before the winter. And this starts in September, usually, or it goes even earlier into August, actually, and until denning time. So last year we saw it definitely in August when the Saskatoon berries shriveled up. Then we saw them coming into town, doing some heavy feeding on garbage and anything else that they could get their hands on. And berries are usually their high calorie food sources. However, when they're not there, they need another one. Fruit trees are a good option for them. And so are seeds like bird seed and other things like that. But naturally, they would be eating seasonal berries, even a bit of salmon on the Nechako, lots of grasses, ants, stuff around here like that. Any carcasses they can find are really good natural food sources.
And with the fruit trees, back to the berry crop failure during a drought, fruit trees are usually watered. They grow lots of fruit. That was one of the big issues we actually had in Prince George. I guess one of the developers decades ago planted a bunch of choke cherry trees in every front yards. Bears like those. Most people don't bother with.
Yeah, we actually saw it in every community. Bears getting into like mountain ash and almost any fruit-bearing tree, even if they weren't considered edible to humans, bears were eating them. So it was a little bit surprising to see because that's not their number one thing. Obviously, they go to apple trees first, That's the biggest and the easiest. So it was definitely an eye opener for everybody, I think, on that regard. But your typical bear that we're dealing with on day-to-day is the problem bear. And this is a bear that actually causes significant property damage. It's food conditioned, habituated, shows signs of aggression. That's when we become involved as shielding the public from anything that might potentially be dangerous. And is something that's a repeat offender. So, we're seeing a consistent behavior that's usually as a result of food conditioning or human habituation. So once they get into that stage, we do intervene, and often it ends in either relocation or euthanization. Leaves us not a lot of choice at that point. And last year, because of the number of bears we were dealing with, those are almost exclusively the type of bears we were dealing with. We didn't have time to deal with anything else.
Yeah, and just so you know, like it's not in the slide, but the number of bears last year in Prince George or in Vanderhoof that we put down in the city of Vanderhoof was 13, which I think the year before was two. Yeah. And that's in the city limits. That doesn't include the outskirts of the farms.
You can add at least 10, I think, for the surrounding area.
12 for the surrounding area.
Yeah. So yeah, food conditioned bears. It's a bear that associates food to people with in those well-known frequented areas. You can see in the picture there, this is a garbage can that was accessed by a bear in Vanderhoof this year. That's over at the museum grounds. So these type of garbages obviously are very easy to open for a bear. They don't have any issue getting into that. If you guys have any questions along the way, just feel free to stop us. Anyway, habituated bears, just so that we're on the same page. When bears start to tolerate close encounters with humans, they lose their fear, and there's usually repeated exposure to humans. So those are the bears that we were starting to see in Vanderhoof at times, and the ones we removed once we saw that consistent behavior.
And it's actually you humans that cause it. I've seen this. Obviously, I'm older than John. Done this a while. Seen it time and time again. Bear comes into town. The first couple of times, everybody chases it off, or the dogs chase it off. Or then it comes in when it's daylight. What do most people do when they see a bear walking down their street? First, they put the dog in the house so it'll quit barking. Then they take a picture. What did the bear learn? This place is awesome, right? And then they just completely lose their fear of people, and there's food near people, and it has a very predictable outcome. So people need to do more to scare the bear off in the initial encounter.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we have close encounters. Yeah, well, the one in the dark from at 15 feet was a little close from comfort.
Yeah, when the bear's running your way and not away from you at about 15 feet, it's there's an issue with that bear. That's not a normal bear behavior, not something we would ever expect.
Especially when I have a dog with me. Bear's still like, nah.
So the main issue, obviously, that this all causes, there's always results in an attack on a person at some point, or pets or livestock, or some sort of contact with humans that's closer than people would be comfortable with. Mostly it's due to, again, the food and or cubs in the area, which sows will bring their cubs in if they find a food source they prefer in town. Not something we want to see, obviously. And to reiterate, they lose their fear of people and become aggressive. So we obviously have to maintain human safety and also try to protect bears. So we're constantly weighing that and how we can do that best. So that's always our goal.
And last year, despite the huge increase, we didn't have anybody get attacked by a bear. So so we have another year like that.
Yes. We did throw our policy in there just for your guys' perspective on how we make a decision on a bear. You'll see along the top of the policy, it actually will tell you the different scenarios that the bear might find itself in, and along the left side, you'll actually see
Location.
Location essentially. So wilderness, rural, or urban. So
and then the level of history.
Yeah, so that would be like frequency of sightings or issues. You'll notice that the bear actions on the very top there with the arrow, it's a one-way arrow. They don't typically go backwards. So when we start to have an issue with a bear in the yellow, it's just a matter of time before it ends up in the green, and the green is basically the green light for us to remove that bear. So unfortunately, it'd be nice if we could train bears to do the opposite and send them back the other direction, but we've never had any success with that. Even moving bears does not typically work. We had a great example of that this year. We actually removed a sow and cubs, and we ended up, 2 weeks.
2 weeks she was back.
Same street, same area. We had to remove them the second time.
So obviously she lost one of the cubs. That's one of the reasons we try not to relocate to. They don't. So we had to put her down, but we took the cub that we had there. So
Yeah.
But yeah, and they actually had one in the States recently. They did a big thing. They actually had a bear that they relocated that came back 1,000 miles. And that's not always why we don't relocate. I've relocated bears before. Again, my history is Vancouver Island. And this bear that we released had 30 kilometers to go back to the town it came from. And it went 60 kilometers in the completely opposite direction and ended up in a completely different town. Once bears become human habituated and food conditioned, they're just searching for people who don't really care where they are. They've just learned that that's where they'll find food. So if this was a wilderness setting, we took a bear from Vanderhoof and dropped it off in Prince George, that doesn't mean it's not going to go to Hickson looking for garbage.
Okay. We're harping on bear attractants a little bit, obviously, because we feel this is very important. But as you can see by the chart there from Wild Save BC, if we ran our call numbers, I'm pretty sure it shows something similar. This is an older chart, but it hasn't changed. You'll see garbage is exponentially the highest attractant for bears throughout that 5-year period they ran, or 6-year period they ran the study. But fruit trees are actually a very close second compared to everything else. I mean, they are significantly less. However, they are what we see as a very close second in Vanderhoof.
And they're also seasonal, right? So.
Yeah. So when the apple trees are out, or when the apples are out on the apple trees, it is significant. We've had days where we're getting 10, 15 bear calls about bears and apple trees in town. So we've definitely want to make sure that's something that you guys are aware of.
And the biggest thing with fruit trees, particularly apple trees, is the fruit that they don't pick that goes rotten. We've all been there in your yard. You have an apple tree in your yard, it doesn't smell, but as soon as the apples hit the ground and start to rot, it'll smell. The bears smell it, they come in. And I've been to calls where the bears have eaten enough rotten apples to get drunk. Which makes for an interesting situation. But
Yeah.
just that's how focused they are on food. They will eat it till they get drunk.
Yeah. So a couple of solutions that we've worked with different towns on in the past with the garbage situation, because typically most of the garbage is issued by municipalities are not going to withstand any bear attack or bear trying to get into it. We've actually seen this. So this picture that's actually there up on the slide that's labeled garbage is actually one that's intact in Tachi currently as we speak. So they've actually retrofitted their bins, which are very similar to Vanderhoof's bins, with this locking mechanism. The next slide actually shows it a little better with a bit of a diagram. This isn't the only way to do it. It was just simply an example we saw that's being used locally. Basically a rim that's being held. The whole lid is basically reinforced with steel, and there's a rim that you can lock around that holds that can down. Bears, once they try with enough effort, if they know there's something easier, whether that's out in the wilderness or down the street with the guy who doesn't lock up his garbage, they'll move on. So they're not going to try and choose through the side of a bin typically, because we'd never keep them out if that was the case. But if it's too hard, if the juice isn't worth the squeeze, they're not going to get in. They're not going to try any longer. So this is actually a type of bin that has actually been certified by
They actually certify them.
Yeah, they
by
do.
putting peanut butter and sardines in them, throwing them in a zoo setting with bears, and they have a certain amount of time. If they don't get into it in a certain amount of time, then it's approved.
Yeah.
And I think it's 10 or 15 minutes. The whole idea is to just frustrate them. And I've been to towns where they have these, and you will see the bins where the bears tumbled it down the street and then just walked it. Just gave up.
Yeah.
Right? It's not worth it.
And surprisingly, sometimes it's something as simple as a ratchet strap going over the lid. We've seen work quite well. I've seen it in Mackenzie. I've watched bears do it. I've had traps set where I haven't even left yet, and the bear's already coming out knocking over garbages nearby. And I've watched it. And the people that have a ratchet strap, bear moves on, goes and finds one that doesn't, right? So
It goes back to that locked car door, right?
Yeah.
Because I've seen 50-pound bear cubs break a car window, but the bears are all the doors locked. Just break the window if we wanted to.
Yeah.
The
So
whole goal is to frustrate them.
yeah, some simple preventative maintenance goes a long way with bears. Back to the fruit trees and berry bushes. Our recommendation has always been that fruits picked daily. Obviously, it's not always possible, but being picked regularly, especially once the fruit's ripe, is what we provide to the public. Make sure you pick it when it's ripe. Don't let it fall on the ground. If it does fall, pick it up, type of thing. Collect the berries. If you don't want the fruit, get rid of the tree. And there is some trees around Vanderhoof that have caused issues. Some on town land, some on private land. They've both been issues. A great example that I was dealing with, because as you guys may know, I live on Silver Smith and Stewart, where my truck's always parked, so you probably all know that. And there's an apple tree there in that corner, and we actually had to shoot 2 bears out of that tree, and a third one that would have been categorized by policy to euthanize, but we decided to let it ride as it was almost winter. So I don't suspect that bear will be evading that tree for this year. It'll come back, I'm sure. So, and we did have a conversation with some staff about getting it picked, and it was picked. But my best practice would make sense in those situations that we just remove the tree. It's a permanent solution. But those are the type of things that we would love to see happen.
And that go for residences too, right? If you have a fruit tree, but you're not using it, you get no attention, get rid of it. If you want the fruit tree, fine, figure out a way to get rid of the fruit. You mentioned you had some crabapple trees and you use some of them. What happens to the rest? Right? Sometimes I've been in, they actually have volunteer groups that go around cleaning, and they go around and pick all the fruit, they take some, give some to the owner, and take some to the food bank. It's a win-win-win, right? So there's other ways to deal with it other than a chainsaw, but if you're not using it, chainsaw is the most permanent method.
Yep, absolutely. I've heard rumors that there's apple trees planted in Riverside Park. I don't know that for certain. Is that actually, do you guys know if that's happened? No. Okay.
That would be bad.
Okay.
That goes back to that corridor thing. Right?
Yeah, we were just gonna say maybe remove them before they become a problem, because they're still small if that's the case. But you know, if that's not the case, then these are just rumors we've heard. So I wanted to make sure we had just mentioned it. That would be a huge problem in a park, especially right beside the river. I mean, that's probably a trifecta for bears. So
yeah, and it's only recently that even municipalities started to take that into consideration. We had one case years ago where someone planted a bunch of mountain ash berries in a mountain community next to the elementary school. Yeah, no, those got removed.
yeah, no, common sense goes a long ways, obviously, and we just want to bring some awareness around that. There's a couple different sites that provide pretty good resources. I mean, we're always obviously a resource, and we're a block away, so we're happy to answer any questions. But when it comes to the technical, you know, like what type of bin or what companies provide bins or retrofit kits, WildSafe BC and Get Bear Smart are both good resources for that type of thing.
I think WildSafe PC actually on their website has a list of approved bins.
They do.
And stuff like right there. So you can ask us. We'd be more than happy to help if you want. But it is a listing.
Yeah. So this is my presentation.
It's your presentation. Big
I
man.
know. Yeah, so we already covered, I think, why we don't relocate. So this is actually, there's a picture with the problem with relocation is actually a picture of the sound cubs we relocated in Vanderhoof this last year. That was right behind St. Joe's, just over the bank down by the walking trails. So
Where John found a hornet's nest.
yeah, where I got stung. And then obviously we look at it from an enforcement perspective, and what we can do is we can write tickets, we can write warnings, we can write orders. It's not feasible to write every single person in town a ticket for a garbage can that doesn't have a lid that locks, obviously. That's where we're asking for your guys' help, obviously, to help us out in that regard, with some of the options that we presented. We have obviously written tickets and warnings, orders in Vanderhoof this last year because of the issues that were caused. But frankly, provincial legislation is not suited, like not well suited anyway, for the type of issues bears cause on a bad year. You know, we're looking oftentimes at fighting these tickets in court, which have a very high threshold to win, which we have successfully done that from the tickets last year. But it is a lot of work for us, obviously, and we're looking to, you know, partner to make sure that we can do some proactive work, so we're not doing so much ticket writing.
And the flip of the viewpoint, the bears aren't actually the problem. The garbage is the problem. That's where it needs to be addressed. And in Prince George, we've had some great working, obviously, with the bear calls we had there, and they have more resources than Vanderhoof does. But their bylaw officers have really stepped up, and I think they said they issued like 170 tickets last year, which, considering they issued none the year before, clearly shows their commitment. And they have a really good bylaw, and it's really easy for them to enforce it. Ours obviously requires a little higher threshold.
Yeah.
And that area that John and I cover, bigger.
Yeah.
And if you guys are looking at this stuff, and I was just thinking, we did this presentation. Well, I did this presentation to Fort St. James a few weeks ago, and they're already working on some solutions. They had some bigger issues with commercial bins, which here the only ones I see that are issue with commercial bins are the trailer parks. So between the trailer parks up there, we removed several, three that I
Three
know of,
for sure.
just
Yeah.
from the trailer park. And one of them was at like 3 o'clock in the afternoon, between the trailer park and the school. Like on that trail right there. Right, and that was again, another bear that wouldn't run from me to you. And I had my dog with me. The bear was like, no, there's kids that just got out of school. So we want to avoid that, obviously. That's a hazard situation. And I don't know what your bylaws are with regards to like apartment buildings and trailer parks as far as using commercial bins, but that would be a huge help.
Yeah.
Because trailers don't have sheds or garages. So they have their garbage outside.
Yeah, and I think there's some more capacity. I think I met a bylaw lady for Vanderhoof. Am I correct in that?
Oh.
So that always could help out if we had somebody like that, you know, providing some bylaw perspective. If there is a bylaw that exists to be enforced there, I'm not again sure of what your guys' bylaws have in that regard. But we did work with Mackenzie on something very similar. We wouldn't have to reinvent the wheel if that was something you guys were interested in. Tumbler Ridge has also created really great bylaws. I think Mackenzie actually modeled theirs after Tumbler Ridge, if I am not mistaken. So, and the worst part about the provincial legislation is that it's not specific to garbage. It's specific to attractants. And if I was to provide any recommendation on how a bylaw would be worded, just make sure it's specific. It makes it a lot easier to enforce.
Justice of the Peace doesn't like general statements in law. Let's just say that.
We had approximately a 2-hour debate with the Justice of the Peace last week on this in open court.
In traffic court, which should be, 10 minutes.
Yeah, so
And I've had them too. I make them an hour and a half, 2 hours, right? Standard trying to explain it because it's not something they deal with on a regular basis either. So, and I know other municipalities, they panic at that word bear smart because that is expensive. Not asking that, just asking for the garbage. Right? That'll solve like 90% of the problems right there.
yeah, and I think you guys have had in the past a wild safe coordinator in Vanderhoof. I think comes every other year, if I'm not mistaken, which would fall on this year.
Yeah.
Okay, that's occurring again?
Well, and the other thing is, again, because we're expecting a drought this year, we can expect more bear problems. The bigger concern, and again, this goes back to my gray hairs, my years on this job, I've seen this before. Northern Lights has over 120 bear cubs in it. Most of those were, they say orphaned, they're not orphaned. Orphaned is the one where John and I took it where we put the mother down. That's orphaned. Most of them are what's called abandoned. When that berry crop fails, those sows don't get fat enough to go into hibernation with their cubs. They will abandon them. I know that goes against our idea of bears, but no, Mother Nature doesn't work that way. That means all those bears that should come out of hibernation this year with their cubs for the second year won't have any, which means they'll breed again. So in next year, more than 50% of the bears will all have cubs, which means in 2026, those 2-year-old bears that we usually deal with, there will be a bumper crop of them. But that's one of those things you can start planning. You get to plan ahead, right? I'm telling you, 2 years from now, there's gonna be a lot of bears running around this town.
I think that pretty much wraps it up, though. Any
questions?
questions?
Great presentation. Thank you very much. Does anybody have any questions?
I think you're coming to our environment committee meeting. You've been invited. One of you, 2 of you have been invited. Angus? Okay. It's coming. And then we're looking at, I think the environment committee will have a lot of questions on the next steps and procedures that we would bring back to council. So we'll flush that out at that committee if that works.
Awesome.
Okay, so be looking for the invite.
Okay.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. That was very in-depth and very insightful and something we can give consideration to. And yeah, we'll look forward to what comes back from the environment committee when they sink their teeth into it.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Okay, moving on to CAO reports. 6.1, we have the Stewart Street Force Main Tender Evaluation Report. So,
Thank you. So council pre-approved budget for this project, Stewart Street Force Main. So accordingly, we tendered the project and got 3 quotations three proposals. The lowest one is Van Enterprise, the amount of $697,000, which is within our approved budget. Approved budget was $750 for construction. So we are recommending to award to Van because they are meeting all of the specifications and they are the lowest. Thank you.
Great. Does somebody want to move the recommendation? Councillor Franco, or?
Just so, sorry, just so it's correct, in the recommendation says awarded to Van Can. I just want to, is it Van Con?
Yes.
Okay,
Oh,
I'll
Vancon.
remove the, yeah, and it's in the recommendation as written, so I want to make sure that it is awarded to the company of Van Con.
You have a seconder? Second. Any discussion? All in favor? That's carried. Move on to 6.2, community flagpole policy. So do you
Thank
want to
you.
move the recommendation, or? Did you want to speak to it, Mokus?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, so this is a new policy. Our existing policy is 4.8 flag guidelines policy. So council directed us to have a flag policy, especially for public flagpole. And so in front of our district office, so there are three poles. So just to the this side of the road. So middle one is actually for public use. So that is the one council directed us to have a policy, and this policy is for that one. So we are requesting for approval of this policy. The other one, 6.8 will be still, 4.8 will be still in place. So this one is 4.10.
Just on the other one.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Do you have a mover?
Move to adopt.
Seconder? Any discussion? All in favor? Carried. Okay, 6.3, use of district vehicles, policy 1.9. You should good to go.
So we are putting forward policy 1.9, use of district vehicle. And we're asking that 1.2 be rescinded. 1.9 just reflects current operating practice and some safety requirements when operating a district vehicle.
Do you have a mover and a seconder? I'll move. Do you have any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? It's carried. Okay, moving on, 6.4, tourism strategy and implementation plan. CFO Stuart, are you speaking to that, or? I got you there.
Thank you. So this is the tourism strategy and implementation plan that was created by Tracy when she worked for the District of Vanderhoof as the Tourism and Community Development Manager. This has been brought before council months ago for review and input. There has been no further input. It's being brought now for approval for implementation.
Somebody like to move the recommendation? Seconder? Second. Any further discussion? All in favor? And that's carried. 6.5, small business cardboard recycling fees amendment for first, second, and third. Anybody want to speak to it, or no? Mover? Move. Seconder? Second. Any discussion? All in favor? Carried. Okay, councillor items. We'll start. Oh, 6.6, yes. Okay, good one. So that was support for the C2C forum with Sycos First Nation. What we're looking for is a resolution that council support the continuing community-to-community forums held with Sycas First Nation, and that district staff provide overall grant management. Somebody like to move that?
I would move that.
Seconder? Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? And that's carried. Okay, now councillor items. We'll start with the Environment Committee meeting minutes from the chair. Oh, sorry, I'll turn you on to.
That's okay. Thank you, your worship. When you read through the minutes, there's a couple items there. I think, Angus, I think that we're bringing those officially, we carried them, but they're coming to council, and you'll see them on page 2. I think the Environment Committee will request that council approve the hiring of a consultant to conduct a feasibility study on the project that we're thinking about, and also a focus advisory group would be created to carry out some of that work. And maybe at that time, when it does come, I can go into a little bit more detail about what the Environment Committee is looking to do that ticks a whole pile of boxes off, and that's using waste wood as energy and creating an opportunity to clean our air, grow our own food, and a whole pile of other things. So when it comes to council, I can speak to it a lot more in depth, but the minutes are here so you can see them. So maybe in the next meeting, you'll see those two come as a resolution to council, and I can talk to those. Moving, if there's no, I can take questions at any time. Just quickly, we did have the regional district, Jeanette, forgot her name, Dirksen, and Mark Roller from Nechako come to this meeting. Both are keen to see something like this project where we take waste wood and create energy and recoup heat from a facility and grow our own food. Pretty interesting concept. It's being done on small scales, and they're on side. So that happened on March 21st. Also on March 21st, if I can continue, Your Worship, mitigating wildfire, attended that workshop. So many groups looking at this wildfire scenario. It is pretty important. Also March 22nd, the Nechako Watershed Roundtable, Climate Resiliency, working on a climate resiliency framework for the Nechako watershed specifically, not provincial. It'll be Northerners making Northern decisions on the watershed. And then on March 23rd, Mayor Moutre and I met with the Minister of State for Renewable Forestry, Andrew Mercier, had a good meeting with him, and the president of Nechako, Greg Stewart. So we threw out a bunch of options that would help our facilities in the area. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Young.
Not a lot in the last few weeks since our last meeting, but I did want to go back to something that was announced, and I attended a meeting with the Nechako View Senior Citizens Home Society when they had that announcement. We met just the day before. Obviously, they knew that something was coming and they're waiting for the announcement. So we went over the project, and to have 28 homes for families, seniors, and those living with disabilities coming into our community, that's huge. Mm-hmm. And I hope that they people give a lot of kudos to this group for, it's been quite a few years they've been working on this project to get it through or over a bunch of hurdles. So to see that announced, that was, I think, really exciting for our community. So I hope people remember to congratulate them on all the work they've done there.
No, for sure.
So that's it for me.
Great, thanks. Councillor Vandola.
Hello, everybody. I attended the on April 15th, the Resource Benefits Alliance meeting held in Terrace with Premier Eby and a number of other municipal leaders across the province or across the north area. Premier announced the $250 million agreement. Initially, he said it was annual, but then he was quickly corrected to say that it was only $50 million per year over the next 5 years to the mini boos in the group. Within that meeting, I had a chance to meet with Minister Cullen and just reconfirm his attendance at our sturgeon release in June. And he did confirm that he will be attending that. So that was good to hear. Also talked to him about the recent retirement of Eamon O'Donoghue as the Associate Deputy Minister for the Ministry of Forests and the importance of having an individual in that, in the ministry executive, holding that position in the north. Of course, he agreed that that would be extremely important to have, but of course, as a minister, he could not guarantee anything like that could happen because they have to follow the public service agreement rules and allow anybody to work in any location they wish. But for us, it would be a big thing to have someone that understands the north, live in the north, and he had totally agreed on that. And then this week, Mayor Moutre and Councillor Frankel and I will be attending the Council of Forest Industry AGM and convention here in Vancouver. And so looking forward to that. That's it for me.
Perfect. We'll move on to Councillor Bulmer.
Nothing for me. I haven't been out and about in the last couple of weeks.
Councillor Martins.
Yeah, thanks. Not a lot more from, very little from me too, as far as the last couple of weeks goes. I just wanted to reiterate with Councillor Young with the Chakaview Seniors announcement was great. I mean, everybody's been excited about that. I did congratulate a couple of them that I, saw later on, and I talked to Dale the other day, and he's, hoping to get construction going like a year from now kind of thing. So that's kind of exciting. And I wasn't sure whether everyone is, but as far as the type of building, but he said be very, very similar to that Parkwood Place one over there. That's the kind of building, and that's going to look pretty nice on Main Street, And then, as well as most of you probably have, especially Councillor Frankel, driving by the old hospital site there all the time. I drove through there the other day too, just to see you, and it looks so ready. Like they've done just a great job in prepping that for that primary care facility. So it's kind of exciting. We've got two really good big projects the next few years. That's, right on. That's very good for us for sure. Good. Yeah, that's it for me. Thanks.
Yeah, no, it is good. And with the senior society there, it's great to see that that's going to be that high density project. That probably just screams high density, right? And yeah, no, that's wonderful. A number of you were here on the 19th. We had a get together with John Rustad, talking about some priorities and that. And I actually thought that was a pretty good meeting with him. I was, yeah, pretty good for that. On the 20th, I attended a Good Neighbours community meeting. I've been doing those. I think we should have somebody from council there. If that was somebody else other than me, that could be a possibility too, something to think about, but we should have some representation there. And I've been doing that since I assumed this position. And as I was a councillor before, I was attending those meetings. Already mentioned on the 23rd, the meeting with the Minister of State for Sustainable Forestry. I think that was a good chance to get that meeting. We've had a meeting online. It's good to start building that rapport. I'm really encouraged that Greg Stewart joined us from Sinclair. I think that really builds the credence that we are working with industry to try and move things forward and look for innovative solutions. So that was good. And Councillor Vandola mentioned that we're heading to Kofi, the three of us, this week. That was really, really good last year. That was my first time attending Kofi, and look forward to this one and seeing what comes out of it. And again, it's making those connections, and a lot of the time, right, as much as what you actually hear come out of the conference. So good. Thank you. And we don't need to receive that anymore. So we'll move on to 9.1. Correspondence from the chamber. And I'm trying to remember if there was an ask in here. Let's close the street, right? Yeah. Have we heard from staff on how they feel about closing the streets?
No, I could not talk to Gary. He was away.
Okay.
But I reviewed this and I found that it is not a problem from our side, because they have a very good plan with detouring and everything. So we don't have any concern from my side. Thank you.
So I do see they say they're not blocking off any emergency service routes, but in the past when we've done this, we've had staff check with RCMP and others. And so even though they say that, I think it'd be good for us to just say that after checking that we'd be okay with it, kind of thing.
Yeah. No, I think that would be a good course of action before we.
Let's say bid it
Go ahead.
Should we make it?
Pending
Pending.
approval by, okay,
I'll move that we approve it. Pending the fire chief. I'll second that.
any further discussion? All in favor? Carried. Okay, and with that, we're at the end of the agenda, so I'll declare us adjourned. Thank you.